Hello, welcome to my channel and thank you for watching. The image I'll be talking about today, and just a reminder that the images are from this um, mid-career retrospective, call and response, and I'm continuing to work through the publication, and for this initial series of talks. So the caption for the image that I'm discussing today is downstream from the company Thor Chemicals. Children use a stream polluted with the highest recorded mercury levels of any water source in the world. Cato Ridge, KwaZulu-Natal, 1990. And this image was produced when I wasn't on an assignment, but I accompanied the intrepid journalist and we became a very close friend from the Weekly Mail, the then Weekly Mail in 1990, Eddie Koch, on his assignment to investigate this company, Thor Chemical. The union workers in that factory were falling ill, and all these discoveries were being made about the major transgressions, as these corporate companies are wont to do sometimes if they're not put under scrutiny. So we headed off and did quite a bit of environmental work, images besides this particular story, whilst in the region, working with people like Chris Albertine of EarthLife Africa and other associated people that were kind of activists like Malcolm Draper, academics and activists in the area. And so in this pristine environment, quite behind and around this light industrial area of in the Cato Ridge area was quite a populated area with rural dwellers who traditionally used the rivers and streams in this way. The woman here is doing her laundry, and probably people within a 1 or 2 kilometer radius would have been utilizing the river in the same way, and kids would swim. I grew up doing exactly the same thing in these kind of rivers, and it was a major travesty. I've recently been looking at the negatives from that period. And this is one of the the problems that has happened with digitization is that negatives have kind of fallen behind, and unless people can muster the resources to digitize them, they tend to fall into an abyss and disappear and become artifacts that could literally disappear. And so I'm part of what I'm doing, part of what this project is about, in fact, is about archiving those negatives and digitizing them and bringing them to the fore so that they are more apparent and available for consideration. Because that's another aspect of our contemporary reality, is that we seem to have embraced this erroneous idea, philosophical concept of the end of history. The negative almost seems like a metaphor for that, of something that ended, and period. Whatever was produced on negative disappears literally from our contemporary memory, and that's a hazardous place to be, as to use a pun from the hazard of this highly polluted stream. Thankfully, due to the intrepid efforts of people like Eddie Koch and Chris Albertine and the many, many other people that were involved in exposing this. I mean, I have images which I'll come to at some point, and I need to talk about them and make them public of protests of the trade unions protesting outside the offices of Thor Chemicals and armed the Thor Chemicals sending armed security to put the protesters under surveillance and intimidate them in that way. Thankfully, due to the heroic efforts of all these protesters, Thor Chemicals was put out of business and had to leave the country eventually. An international corporate that was exploiting our lax, at that point, highly lax regulation that allowed for these kind of things. I mean, workers that worked in that died in Thor Chemicals itself due to mercury contamination. And maybe it's time to say that one of the difficulties of being an independent media practitioner is that one of the resources that are required to cover stories like this. So I wasn't able to really cover. I was based in Johannesburg at the time, and this was a KwaZulu-Natal function. I mean, I got to do the very little documentation that I did by piggybacking on organizations like, media publications like the Weekly Mail, which was at that point, the Weekly Mail did not have a photography department, and people like myself were called upon to, with the hope of getting a few pictures published and paid for, to accompany journalists. That's how we did these images. That's how I did these images anyway. Yes, they did occasionally commission some work, but for if Eddie Koch, probably, I think we were like on a 5 or 6 day expedition. No, there was no payment for that, and it's made producing this kind of work and keeping it in the public memory, a difficult task, and one that is what's the right adjective? It's not sustainable, to use a more contemporary word. In that, that's the big problem with newspaper archives, is that many of them have disappeared altogether or are not that visible. And a part of my practice from the very beginning was an understanding of the importance of the archive and wanting, one of the reasons I didn't take a job with, the Rand Daily Mail or the Star or the many other opportunities I had was even the wire agencies, Agence France Presse, that I worked strong for quite a bit, Associated Press, was that I did not want to relinquish copyright because I wanted to retain the integrity of the archive that I saw myself as a life work producing. And so images like this, yes, they exist. Other people, newspaper photographers, media produced better work than I did, and more copious amounts of it, because they were in endowed publications that were, primarily making their money from advertising, which is what mass media does, and had the resources to put to use to go out and harvest these kind of images. But for people like us in Afripix and independent media, it's much, much more difficult to produce the images and to actually even produce the archive at some point. So there's a lot of talk about the archive, but very little action in terms of resources to make that happen. People have to go and look far and look abroad for these kind of resources, where there's a greater awareness, maybe, or access to the resources. Bigger pockets, so to speak. So so I'm in the process now. I haven't done that yet, but I'm quite close to documenting all the other images that were produced during this particular shoot. In a few sessions later, I will come to a few other images that weren't related to this mercury issue, but yeah, chemical dumping was a huge issue in the region. Um, just by done largely by unscrupulous practitioners who tended to tended for the disposal of chemicals and then dumped them in near human habitats, and with great grave results for the people who lived in that region. So I think I'll end it there. I'm sure I could say a lot more about this as I normally think I can. But for now, I'll say thank you for watching. And for more information on myself and my work can be found on my website, a link to which, including my blog and email address, can be found in the video description below. If you like this talk, remember to click the like button and press subscribe. It helps the channel grow.